Welcome, everybody, to the Industrial Insights Podcast. I have Tim Judge with me of Agilix, and we're talking about how to unify data in someone's operation and within the supply chain. And it's one that I know from experience on the brokerage side. My data is not unified. I know I wish that it was, and I know I've attempted no less than 5 times to try and do it, and have had a hell of a time. So I could only imagine when the complexity and scale is times 10 or times 100, how difficult it would be for people. So Tim, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here today, and I'm excited to open that topic up and kind of just understand how we help people, because I think we all serve kind of the same community, and this is an aspect I'm sure that everybody needs lots of help with.
Yeah, great to be here, Justin. Thanks so much for having me. Always love talking to experts in the industry, and appreciate you having me this morning. Excited to chat.
Yeah. And then Agilix is your own firm. You own it. You've bootstrapped it. And then you came from a bunch of places that people are very familiar with. The ones that ring true to me anyways is Invista and Manhattan Associates, just because I've seen them around. I've spoken with some of their team. I've had some clients that have worked with their team. So it seemed like you got 10 years plus with those guys. And Tara, I'm less familiar with. Maybe you can just help us understand part of your journey of your career progression and how it came to be so that you could stand alone and stand up your own firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised in New York on Long Island. So my first kind of time getting outside of the Northeast was coming down to school down south at Georgia Tech, and I knew I was good at math. That's basically it. Came down. It was a nice, bright, sunny day in Atlanta, and in the spring, and we went to Braves game and went to Six Flags, and I'm like, okay, I could do with this, and I knew I wanted to be in a city. So Atlanta was kind of a fun city to be a part of. And then graduating with industrial and systems engineering degree, which could be, there's so many different areas you can get into, as you know, with an IE degree. Process, and you can work for a company, you can work for software, you can work in consulting, and
I have
really
a
just got
nephew that's with Wisconsin in their program now and is
awesome.
halfway. And so we're all interested to see so where do you go with that? And how does that match up with your interest and
I love it.
today's economy for sure?
I love it. And then the economy and the industry, and especially heading into things like AI, and it's just changed so much even over the last couple of years that I'm digging up presentations of being at seminars with IEs, and recommendations for what to get into is even changed over time. So always love to talk to your nephew, and if I could help in any way. But you hit the nail on the head. There's so much opportunity and different things that you can get into. For me, is more just kind of happenstance. Got into software and worked for really kind of a startup called was a Geocom TMS. Took me a minute on the transportation kind of side, and it was the beginning, which was exciting. Kind of the beginnings of cognitive computing, which is now called machine learning and into AI, to really handle kind of last mile delivery, and things like that. And kind of got into the software. They ended up getting acquired by Red Prairie, which became JDA, which became Blue Yonder. And I ended up going over to work for their biggest competitor at the time, Manhattan Associates, and was there for about 7 years, and got to, you know, become an expert in warehouse management solutions and into transportation management and order management. So really got excited about kind of the software side of things, and working with, companies, 100 companies across retail and consumer
Big
goods,
league
and
experience there, I would
big
imagine.
out of the
Yeah.
gate. And it was so funny because you're like the 23-year-old, right, going in and talking to CIOs of multi-billion-dollar organizations, and just kind of making it up as you go, right?
That you know more than they
You know
do.
more
Yeah.
than you do, classic consultant, right? And I remember like literally just being like, yep, yep, yeah, we can do that. And then going in and calling up, my cell phone, and calling someone back at Manhattan and be like, can we really do that? Does that work like that? And then going back in and be like, yeah, we can definitely help with that. I'm glad you brought up that question. and just kind of fake it until till you make it. But with that, you learn a ton, right? You learn, a ton from experts on the software side at Manhattan, and then just your customers, right? And being on the road and the like. And then from there, ended up going back, while working at Manhattan, get my MBA back at Georgia Tech, because they had an executive program that I could do on the weekends and still travel. And I always tell people there's no way I could do it again today, right? But at 30, I was on a plane, Monday through Friday, get off the plane, go to class, Saturday, Sunday, back on a plane on Monday for a year and a half. And then after that, I had, and you mentioned Intera, so super, kind of smart. So into kind of machine learning and cognitive computing and building an ontology. And I went and kind of worked for Steve for a while at Intera, and just got me really passionate about that. But it was a little bit too ahead of its time from where the market was and where supply chain, was kind of having their challenges. And I found that, most of the companies were still struggling with just basic data design strategy kind of. So then went back to kind of helping on that side of it at Invista, helping with network design, network strategy, helping with process design, and then big system implementations, upgrades and transformations and stuff and the like. And then from there, really the biggest gap that kind of stuck with me the whole time that I saw is just companies struggling with data, right? Is as we evolve to these different systems, and the industry is even getting more fragmented, right? Because as companies should, they focus on a specific niche, and that may be warehouse technology, that may be labor, that may be slotting, that may be transportation. And even within transportation, right, you have fleet solutions that focus better on your own fleet, and LTL, and some on parcel and manifesting. And at the end of the day, my average customer would have probably between 25 and 30 on average different software supply chain solutions that are all very siloed, all have their own data, and none of them talk to each other, right?
Just use Zapier. It'll all work out. Don't worry
Zapier,
about it.
right? Just
Yeah, tap it up.
sprinkle AI on it, throw it to Zapier, and you're good to go. And I always talk back, as like the one moment when I realized to start Agilix was, I was sitting at a go live, and I got called into like the CIO's office, and he's like, we spent X amount of millions on our ERP, we met X amount of millions on our warehouse management system. Like, why can't I get a picture of inventory? Like, why is one system telling me we have this and the other system telling me we have this, and the customer is asking what we have, and I can't give them an easy answer? Like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, you're right. That is ridiculous, right? And so I made it my mission to like, hey, like one version of the truth, one understanding, irrespective of what systems you have, and it should be easier. And part of it was like, there's all these great technology that's coming out, but supply chain's not really using it, and operations aren't really using it. So how can I connect the dots between the best in class technology and thought leadership and innovation on the marketing side, on the big tech side, and what's being done, and what's being applied to supply chain and operations? So in a nutshell, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hire the best data scientists, the best industrial engineers. I'm going to get them in a room. I'm going to get them talking and come up with better solutions for companies, and try to, kind of feed through all of the noise that's out there. And as you said, right, there's so much marketing and what's real and what's not. And, I live in it and I'm confused, right? So for our customers that also have, to run a business, to take care of their customers, to do training, to build like there's no way that they can keep up with all of this, nor that we expect them to. So just making it a little bit easier on them, and where do we start? I mean, especially as we get into more and more AI and how fast that's moving, is like, how do we take care of the existing business and then better plan for the future using these technologies?
Yeah, I can only imagine like how big of a market there is, like
Right.
for help here, just like being underwhelmed are being like disappointed inevitably because your expectations were like everything will be perfect after.
Everything will be perfect.
Yeah, and like that's not how things work. Cool. So then you built what is like I'd hate to just call it a like a dash series of dashboards, right? But that
Yeah.
is like those are places where you think of like executives can have access to the outputs or like consolidated outputs in a place that they can
Yeah.
control what they see, and that it like encompasses each area of their business. And
Yeah.
so who like, what's the marketplace in sense of like, who is at I imagine you need to be at a maturity level or a level of scale where like, this is that growing pain that you need to go through. So is it like by
Yeah.
revenue? Is it by, complexity? Or how do you judge, like, who's ready for this? 'Cause, I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody needs or wants it to some degree.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a great question. And really because of the different stages that different companies are at when it comes to the data maturity, we really set out to kind of meet a customer kind of where they're at, right? So really depending on, where they are. Some companies, obviously large companies are going to have full out data science teams, full suite or set of armies of data engineers and data architects and the like. And then other companies that don't have any of that, that are still kind of large, that are like, hey, let's rely on some of our partners
You're our data scientist, Tim. Yes.
as a service, right? and
Yeah.
and can kind of do that, and trying to meet them at where they are. So the first 8 years of the company, 8 years, we really worked with kind of companies of all sizes, right? We worked with the large kind of Fortune 100 companies, mainly in really if you move, store, make product, we want to talk to you. So that's the big retail companies, consumer brands, logistics companies that service those first two. But then we would also work with, kind of 50 to $100 million companies that just needed kind of data help, right? And just trying to like, hey, we just, we're implementing Microsoft Dynamics and we need better visibility. We're operating on spreadsheets, and we'd help them all the way to, hey, how do we consolidate and unify all 30 different solutions across SAP, Manhattan, and the like. And what we saw after 8 years of helping companies do all the, kind of the transformations, and moving data from on-prem to the cloud and consolidating, and as you said, better visibility through all the technologies that they can use, as far as dashboards and visualizations and into prediction and prescriptive analytics. How do we, we keep kind of doing the same project again and again and again, and as as any consulting company would do, how do we really productize it also to help companies move faster, right? So how do we take what we're learning across all the different types of industries and companies and really make it an accelerator for companies to move as fast as possible? Because once this AI and technology really starts to get exponential, that gap between companies is just going to grow, right? The ones that are, to your point, ahead of the maturity
You're
cycle, that
speaking
have
to
been doing
all of
this.
our anxiety, all business leaders that are like, it is accelerating and I can only
It's
imagine.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
And how do we get the smaller company, the $100 million company, the $500 million company, to be able to move or even compete against the ones that are, the $10 billion plus, large companies that have that? And that's where we kind of came out with Agilix, our flagship platform, but really to make it as turnkey as a company needs it, right? So we're going to bring the best technologies to bear, right? We partner with Snowflake, we partner with every data integration tool that you could possibly think of to really get scale and help these companies kind of move as fast as the ones that have, kind of a blank check for their IT and data transformation. So it's gone pretty well. I believe the more and more we get scale, the smaller we'd be able to go for companies. because I think that's super exciting. It's amazing. You hear the stories, right? Like when Netflix started with like 5 people, and I really do see that now as I see companies that are much, much smaller getting massive amounts of valuation and value just based on, better leveraging technology. So size is almost going to become I don't want to say moot, but the companies that are only have, 50 people may be able to go pretty quick, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's so wild, but it's like you have to have that skill set, you have to understand how to utilize it, and you have to, like, put in the time and, like,
You
figure
do.
out, like,
Yeah.
where's the angle or, like, what piece of leverage like, moves the needle the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. That's like the number one question I get is like, where do we start? Like we're hearing, AI is great and Gen AI and LLMs and we're trying to roll out Open AI or ChatGPT to our workforce to be able to, but how do we apply that to enterprise data, right? And how do we start creating agents that can go do, tasks kind of across data? And what's interesting is the same answers that I would apply to, hey, how do we understand where our inventory is, or where's my stuff, where's my PO, like the same answer is going to be applied to AI, only more so. So AI, yes, needs the data, but it also needs the context, right? So those companies that did do a better job of organizing their data, of getting it in one place, of cleansing it and making sure it's needed, are also going to be the ones that move faster with AI, because AI needs cleaner data even more than humans need cleaner data.
Yeah. Yeah, undeniably, right? Yeah, so
Yes.
if you started with the pain point that, Mr. Big is like, "This doesn't line up, it doesn't make sense, and I can't get answers to the questions I need that will connect our operation with the vision I have for the company," right? That's like that's
Yes.
the final boss that's like, "Alright, let's do something about it." But inevitably, I gotta imagine there's a lot of people that are in operations that sense this pain way before Mr. Big does or Mrs. Big.
Yeah.
Um, where's my stuff, right? That's a telltale sign. What like give us like the bread and butter example of what you
Mhm.
see in like a middle market company. Because I got to
Yeah.
imagine like that's where most people play. That's like a lot of private companies that are doing 100 million or 500 million or that have grown and have scaled, but
Yeah.
like they are looking to make that jump. And I feel like that's a lot of people in our community deal with that like market, that like
Yeah.
of tenant or size of like a company. So like, what's the state of the union for like that middle of the road, like a prime example?
Yeah, it's the pros of being kind of a relatively new or mid-sized company is that you don't have to deal with all of those legacy type systems that you're supporting, right? It'd be easy to say like, hey, you don't need, all of these different legacy and mainframe systems that you have, but the reality is it takes time and a lot of resources and planning to get off of those systems, right? So you kind
I got Salesforce. I can't get rid of it to save my life. So I
Right.
feel
You're
that.
kind of stuck, right? And in a lot of those companies, some of it intentional, some of it just the nature of all of the users and infrastructure that you've built around those platforms. But there's never what to say another way, there's never been a more exciting time probably to start a company, because you're starting from what's out there and you can kind of pick, the best strategy and the best solutions based on the technologies that are available. So for most mid-sized companies, I would say that's definitely a, lean into your strengths, right? Your strengths is that you don't have that baggage of old systems and old technologies that you have to worry about. Um, the second thing I would say is that really start, kind of planning out of what tasks that you have out there that necessarily need to be done by a human versus can be, automated by something. Because what we're starting to see is almost every, let's say, size, repetitive type tasks, if it can't be done by some kind of AI, it's coming, right, in the next year or two, right? So really start to break down your tasks of what is required kind of for a human to do, and kind of look at that and bake that into your strategy, right? So the last thing you want to do
It
is
seems
hire
like that's the toughest part of like,
yeah,
man,
yeah,
there's 6,000 of them. Okay,
yeah,
well, where are we going to start? Who's going to do which ones? And like, who's
yeah,
going to devote the time to it and make like a project of it?
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I would empower your people to almost, you read things, and I think it's a good strategy, is almost to start to think about how they promote themselves, right? How they can kind of start thinking about their
I love
tasks,
that. Yeah.
not to work themselves out of a job. But you said it earlier, like there's so many things that people can get really excited about and do that they probably want to do, that they don't want to be doing all of that stuff, right? So almost embed in your culture, like, hey, we want you to work on what you really get jazzed up in the morning about, like what you really
This
want to
is
do.
the freedom from versus freedom to, for sure.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Freedom from versus freedom to, right? And then pair that with, in all honesty, and you got to look at your culture, is like, hey, what do I am I listening? Like, what do they want to do, right? So I know for our team, we go through and we say, okay, like, help me rank the things that you currently work on, and what things, it's almost like the ikigai, right? If you've heard about it, right? So the Japanese, like what are you really passionate about? Like, yeah, I'm not going to have you go watch Netflix videos all day. Like, you might find that fun, but there's no market for it. It's not valuable, right? So what are the things that our customers need? What are the things that you're excited about? What are the things that you want to develop or have skills in? And where that intersection point is, let's focus there. And I can guarantee you, for 99% of people, it's not the fixed data in Excel. It's not the answer a customer, kind of complaint, right? Or document, work tasks, or document, like all of those repetitive tasks, like they don't want to do. And honestly, they're probably using ChatGPT now to try to do it quicker, regardless of
Hopefully.
whether your company
Yeah.
allows it or not anyway, right? Which is a whole other security question. But I do think, like, in working with your team and then baking that into their promotion. And I don't know if every company is that way. I mean, if you are, Justin, but I'm definitely like, hiring people takes time. Like, reaching out, and interviewing people takes time. Like, I'd much rather give those opportunities to the people that are already at my company, right? The people
It's
that have
not that
built
you
it.
don't
Yeah.
value like the team. It's just like you make the cost to hire like it's a bigger cost than maybe you thought it was, like emotionally,
Yes.
mentally, time wise, like fatigue wise. You like scrutinize it maybe harder now.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I always want to give the at bats and the chances to the people that are at my company, right? They've already invested in the culture. They already know what the goals are. If you've set that out, which you should, they know where you're trying to go, right? And they want to help, right? They want their work to be as valuable as it possibly can be for the customer, and that helps them learn. That gets them excited. Incorporating them into, let's get rid of any of the repetitive tasks that you currently do, and let's free up some of your time. Let's buy back your time, so that you can do what you want to do, right? Another thing, it's kind of the yeah, we have, a lot of us have our own companies and kind of run it. We're entrepreneurs, but if you're at a company, treat it the same way, right? You're an entrepreneur. You can, you still have your time, you still have your ownership and accountability of things, and the number one important is, like, how do you spend your time? So involve them in the process, help them map out where things can be, maybe build business cases around it too. Like you said, there may be 6,000 tasks out there that people do across departments. Help them map out, like, how much of your time is spending, like how valuable is this task to the customer, how, many teams need your output and can make it. Because you'll find there's VPs spending 4 hours a week in Excel, right? If not more. So how do we get rid of that?
Yeah. Some may just not even be necessary, some of the tasks. So you're just used to doing it. Yeah.
Right.
I love it. I thought we were talking about forklifts and moving pallets. No, this is part of like a organizational transformation and like how do you modernize and how do you like get with the digitization of work and like yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it's wild to think of like part of your day has to go towards this, which it would
Mhm.
if that's part of your way of being promoted and part of like your career progression, like or part of the yeah, the vision for the organization. And that like
Yeah.
you wouldn't do that otherwise. I would imagine some of the pain of this and evolution is also based on trying to automate your warehouse, right? Is gonna like
Yes.
add that much more need to this. So that's where I would think to like pivot this a little bit is to like inside the four walls and like as I was
Hmm.
going through the different visuals that the executive gets, one is focused on the warehouse, and then
Yeah.
there's categories within the warehouse. Can you open that up a little bit just so people can understand like what they get when they're gaining clarity or like a visibility into the warehouse and like
Yeah. Yeah.
after they've done some of this, what's possible that they can have on the other side of doing the work that like perhaps is
Yeah.
less glamorous.
I love it. And I always use the DC as kind of a microcosm of the larger supply chain, right? Because you still have inputs, you have outputs, you have, different flows, you still have, customers on the outside, you have suppliers and vendors on the inside, right? So it is kind of a small model of the overall supply chain. And systems and technology similarly, right? So even if and this was harder to do, but as we have more automation and we have more systems and stuff, this becomes even more true. So even if you take the four walls of a warehouse, right, what do you typically have? You have a feed of orders, probably from an ERP, right? Wherever your system of record is that stores all of your HR information, your overall kind of inventory footprint. So you have your ER feeding in the WMS, right? Or the warehouse. Within the warehouse, you have a WMS, right? You may have a labor management system that complements the WMS. You may have slotting as a standalone or as part of the WMS. You may have a Chronos time clock system or ADP or something that has the time systems that need to integrate with the LMS and the WMS. You may have warehouse control systems around your automation. So you may have like an Intelligrated or a Dematic of that. And then within those, you may have, sortation systems from Balmer and you may have robotics from companies like Gray Orange and Locus. You may have all of those different systems create data, right? And provide, as you were saying, kind of end visibility to an order, to an item, to where my inventory is, to the like. So even within the four walls of a warehouse, you may have 15 different data feeds and data systems that probably are operating in very black box silos today to some degree, right?
Yes.
So very, very simply, even if we're
You've
talking
got the
about
black box of black boxes.
black
Yes.
box of, but well, is a great question. So what we try to do is create it so we don't want to be like, hey, we get your data and it'd be nice, but we take your data and then you're reliant on us for the rest of your lives and you have to use our visibility solution and don't use Power BI or Tableau, like use ours. And for companies that don't want to invest in technology, we can provide that turnkey, but we also keep it super open. If they use Tableau, great. Connect Tableau. If you use Power BI, use it, right? If you want to connect us to agents to do AI and predictive, great. If you want to connect our data to LlamaSoft or to OptiLogic to do network design, great. If you want to use our data for planning and connect it to O9 or Logility, Kinaxis, great. You could do that. So we definitely want to keep it so that it's open for we're not prohibitive to them, to our customers doing whatever they want to with the data, right? and have that while protecting our structure of the data and our unified model so that we can take our learnings from all the other customers and make that optimal, right? So even if we're talking four walls with microservice architecture, we're going to get a little bit technical now, but microservice architecture, right, in the
Let me put
cloud.
some eye drops in so that I don't say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm ready for this. Yeah.
Simplest way to say it is those are designs for you to be able to deploy on the cloud and make it very, very fast to consume transactions and give the users actions, right? We scan a pallet, it tells me where to put it away. We run a wave, we're doing our picking, and you don't have time for delay. And the reality is you're scanning within a DC, it's connecting to the cloud. There's a lot of operations going in it. It needs to be fast. But what that means from a data perspective is everything is its like own data schema for a particular function. And what you ended up with used to be, and you mentioned 1,000 data points or 1,000 tables is now 20,000, right? Is now 50,000. So trying to do reporting on 50,000 tables and 500 different item tables takes forever, right? So what we do is try to consolidate that to as much in a simple data form for the purpose of reporting, for the purpose of using it in AI for the purpose of making decisions. And that's completely different for how the database collects the data, right? So that's really is to simplify that as much as possible. Because to your point, the VP of operations, the chief supply chain officer does not care. He just wants to know, how are we doing? How are my people doing? Where's my stuff at? What are our SLAs? Are we hitting those? How do we get better? And we want to simplify everything else for that business leader.
Yeah, I love that it's an open system, right? Because that's all about like helping their organization mature, right? And then like they can learn from it and they can adapt from it, and they don't have to like repeat that
Yeah,
step of the scale process.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we can't cut, and it's funny with companies, and it always drives me crazy, Justin, is like companies want the latest and greatest. And there's so many companies out there that are doing a good job of being the experts and niching themselves in a very, very particular area. And if anything, we're getting more specialized in that way. We're getting more fragmented. Like we can't possibly be everything to everybody. We can't be the best visualization software and the best optimization software and the best. So we want to make sure we make everything else easier and specialize on making the data easier, and also take the best of the world for partnerships and for companies so that we can enable companies to bring their own best-in-class technology to the platform.
Yeah. And I could only imagine juggling like unplugging a system, plugging the new one in, and how
Yeah,
that changes the
that too.
process because there's some new one that's better for your organization. And then like
Yep,
that means the pipes and the plumbing need to be like reorchestrated perhaps.
you got
And
it.
yeah.
And that's a great question, and it's never a finished product, right? So all of our customers have some technology that they're in the process of upgrading, right? And you want to align with that, but not forget about it. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to do, right? So if you're going through digital transformations and big upgrades and big technology, especially on the execution side, and not thinking about data strategy, it will become harder, And what makes me sad and keeps me up at night is when I get the call, it's like, hey, Tim, we just went live with this system and we don't have visibility into what we're doing. And it's like, why didn't you call me 3 months ago? Because then we could have planned it and you could have everything, you need now.
It
And
was
I get it.
avoidable.
It was
Yeah.
avoidable. And I get it too. You gotta worry about shipping boxes and picking orders and routing trucks and places. I totally get that, but it is so much easier if you also think about, hey, what do we need downstream? How do we show a customer where their order is? Answer the questions. How do we get through this go live easier, right? I can't tell you how many things we've built around health checks and and things just to make go live easier, reduce risk, to understand like when things get out of sync ahead of time, alerts and checks and things like that around go lives that I think customers would benefit from.
Yeah, I was gonna go with, like, training and adoption, and, like, that is,
Mhm.
like, the bane of IT and, like, systems sometimes is, like, are people actually gonna, like, change their behavior and put in the time to
Mhm.
learn a new system and, like, those challenges? But,
Yeah.
perhaps this, health check and, like, things like that is milestones along the way of a project that, like, reduce risk and ensure success or, like, catch the symptoms of challenges early so that you can, like, smooth out the path. Imagine go live is like, the biggest red blinking light in the back of a CEO's mind of, like, "We can't be down when this go live," or, like, "That's risk." So maybe, we'd pivot a little bit and focus a little on that for a second, if you wouldn't mind. Just like, what's that look like? I think I understand why it's important, but like, people don't always get that. And this is one big choke point. Or if there's one choke
Yes.
point, it's not like everybody will use the product, like the finished
Yeah.
product of what you're putting together. Who uses it, and like how affected are they by challenges and go live?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you talked about 4 earlier. One of the things that's much easier to do now that you have all the data is to do, which I would consider, and you could call it control tower, you can call it a digital twin, you can call it a unified model, but essentially having all of the data as a digital representation of what's physical, but being able to then simulate the state of things. And the reason I bring that up is you can simulate, hey, we're bringing on this new system, we're going to anticipate some bumps, some additional resources needed, additional flow, so we can simulate that ahead of time, right, to your point, and make some assumptions to, hey, what if we did have to ramp up orders, so instead of going from 50,000 orders a day to, bringing on a new WMS, is can we offload some of that volume to other DCs until we ramp up. And the easiest way to do that is through simulation, right? Where it's, rule of thumb, hey, if we're receiving less inventory, but you actually can get to a point where you're actually simulating like this. We need this much more labor. We're going to take this much conservative kind of ramp up, and it's going to take this much to get, level, and take into account, as you said, training, right? So maybe, it's a new system. They usually pick at, 100 cases per hour, 100 units per hour. They're probably going to drop to 70 units per hour as they get used to the new system, right? And we're training. So baking that in and then backing into, what's our ramp up strategy on bringing on this new system. And I don't think enough companies really do that. And the technology's there right now with a better, with having the data in one place and being able to simulate that, so that you could significantly mitigate some of that risk, right? And I've definitely been, I don't know if you have, I'm sure, like part of go lives are around where it gets pretty scary there for a little bit, getting these new systems up and running. And I have probably to write a book of all the horror stories I've seen.
There's plenty of room for opportunity to have things go wrong or off the rails or like be delayed or, yeah, cause issues.
Yep.
I love it. That's awesome. If it's 8:56, Tim, we could bust 2 more hours on this. I would say let's go lightning round. And if you could give me
Yeah.
something that you think is overrated or overhyped versus like underrated or underhyped. And you can take that to the industry, to the project, to what executives you hear them talking about. What would
Ooh.
you say is overhyped or underhyped?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think AI comes to mind, and I will tell you, I've been on the other side of it where I'm like everything is hype, and this is, and I honestly think I'm kind of switching the other way. I think in a lot of ways it's underhyped. The biggest thing that I think is underhyped is the short-term implication of AI, because I think a lot of companies are just uncertain, right? And anytime you have uncertainty with, and not just AI, but tariffs and AI and trade and geopolitics and the economy and macro and put all of that together, is I think the hiring market is going to be challenging. And then I think as you mentioned, the exponential nature of the changes, I think in the short term, it's going to be hard to keep up, right? And being close to supply chain, that's warehouse workers, that's drivers, that's everything. And I think having a plan I think we almost treat it like it's underhyped, like that should be a huge focus. What I think is overhyped is also AI, so both underhyped and overhyped. I think what's overhyped is, as you said it earlier, is let's just connect AI to it and we can not worry about all of the other things, right? And you still need to worry about, maybe I'm a little biased, but data and organizing data. It is as simple as garbage in, garbage out. AI is not making intelligent decisions where data. It's not a silver bullet or a band-aid for data quality. It needs information, context, and from people to be able to make decisions. So I think that is careful. Like there's no free lunch, as my economics professor used to say, right? And I think that companies need to even be more focused on it. And to connect the two together, Justin, I think that people need to really lean into their knowledge, their expertise, their wisdom, if you will, right? Their accumulated knowledge that AI, and focus on things, and then communication, connections, people, the things that you really can lean into, that what it is to be human, that a machine will not easily replicate.
Yes, they cannot grow a mustache for
It
November
cannot.
to
You need
support a
that, man.
cause for everyone's
Exactly.
betterment. You must appreciate Eric Schmidt at Google, and
Yeah.
man, I wish you could just get that like live streamed to the office. It's so wild to like focus on like what he's seeing, saying, learning, suggesting, and like I can't get enough of that. So for like, there's a few podcasts that he frequents, and
Yeah.
it's like, man, the more we can get his view, I've just really like appreciated how he lays stuff out, and then it's such a like he's viewing it from such a high level that like it's you get to see the future happening.
Oh yeah, he's great. Yeah, I just saw him was on Peter Diamandis' kind of had a week of him. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely encourage everybody. He's definitely one I listen to on what's to come, for sure. And then the Ray Kurzweils, and people that have been right about the different trends, and combination of different technologies kind of coming to bear, have been pretty spot on, which is both terrifying and interesting and exciting at the same time.
Yeah. I would say maybe if we did this again sometime, we could get a little more into the weeds of like when you went into like tasks and like data integrity, cleansing, and what are all like step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Like most people are stuck on step 1. Maybe
Yep,
we could open up a little of that of like what people can do on their own to be ready to then work with someone like you on a project like this.
absolutely. Yeah, give us a call. We'll look in. But yeah, I'd love to chat with you on it anytime. Oh, this is great. I was like, you got me inspired for the weekend.
Yeah, let's get out there and make it happen. So Tim
Awesome.
Judge, yeah, thanks for spending time today, and look forward to catching up with you later. And I hope everyone appreciated this, and we know it's on people's minds. So this should be a great like entry level to start like a conceptualizing how can I mature and scale and like bring all these disparate systems together.
I love it. Thanks so much, Justin.
Okay, we'll see you later, Tim.
See ya.